Thanks so much, Sora and Nazanin. Let's go to our top story. The Prime Minister says Britain's well placed to be at the forefront of developments in artificial intelligence as he led the final day of talks at the Global AI Summit at Bletchley Park. Rishi Sunak's already secured international backing on a first-of-its-kind agreement that promises to manage the risks of the technology. 28 countries, including the US and China, signed that declaration yesterday.
But as with every wave of new technology, it also brings new fears and dangers. So no matter how difficult it may be, it is the right and responsible long-term decision for leaders to address them. And while this was only the beginning of the conversation, I believe the achievements of this summit will tip the balance in favour of humanity. Because they show that we have both the political will and the capability to control this technology and secure its benefits for the long term.
The Prime Minister is also set to hold a live chat with billionaire ex-owner Elon Musk later this evening. Joining me now in the studio is AI expert and barrister Andrew Eborn. Thank you for coming, Andrew. And down the line, I'm joined by James Heale, a political correspondent at The Spectator, and tech journalist Will Guyatt. Good to have you all on board. Let me start with you, Andrew, because you're here, particularly. This sounds very positive. It sounds incredibly optimistic. It positions Britain right at the forefront, which is obviously where we'd like to be in all matters. Do we deserve to be at the forefront? What have we done to deserve it?
Without a doubt. I always say that AI, artificial intelligence, is perhaps our greatest human achievement, but also the biggest potential existential threat. And what Rishi has done, he's got together these great people from around the world to have the very first AI safety summit. So all credit to him. He got China on board as well, and all of them have signed this Bletchley Declaration, basically saying, look, we recognise the risks, things need to be done about it, and we need to collaborate.
But yesterday, all my correspondents on the AI subject said, oh yeah, all it says is, yeah, we guarantee to meet again and have another meeting to talk about having another meeting to talk about another meeting ad infinitum. It doesn't achieve anything. They haven't signed up to anything except more meetings.
And that's a fair criticism, because what they've said is that first you have to start out, you get insight before you have oversight, is what Elon Musk said. So you have to understand what it can do in terms of disinformation, in terms of putting people out of work. 300 million jobs are going to be lost to AI, says Goldman Sachs. But also look at the wonderful creative stuff that's happening, not just in the creative industries, but also things in medicine, the great seismic changes and advances there. So it's understanding both the good and the bad.
All right, so what do we really need to be frightened of? Because Rishi Sunak, I think, would like to say this is all very exciting, very wonderful, but he had to say that there are things that are deeply worrying about every possible advance. What are we worried about?
Well, there's a number of things. There could be discrimination. It can be used for the spread of disinformation. We've had an election in Slovakia very recently where an artificial recording of one of the political candidates was put out, a fake recording. It was generated by AI, and as a result of it, they probably lost the election. So there's all sorts of spread of disinformation. So what we need to do, we're living in a very diseased information age at the moment, and to make sure that we understand and question everything. That's the principle.
All right. What about the bit where they arise and smite us?
Well, that's the thing.
I'm basically thinking of Daleks.
Well, I think, no, but
That's
also there are lots
We
of
will
movies.
exterminate you.
No, and fact could be stranger than fiction. There are
Yes.
so many movies, and Biden himself, he referenced Mission Impossible,
Right.
turning around and saying, "Hang about, this is the biggest threat. We've got to be aware of that." And part of the danger is this: if the AI misunderstands us, if you say, "Look, end human suffering," well, if you end an animal's suffering, you put it down. So you look at that sort of basis. Yeah, end world hunger. We'll get rid of all the people who are eating.
Yes.
All of those sort of things could be very, very
Or
dangerous.
protect the planet, and
Or
we're the
protect the
people. We're the people, defaming and defrauding the planet.
Absolutely.
So annihilate us. But cannot each tiny piece of tech be programmed with some kind of message which says preserve human life, preserve human life?
And that's the key to it, and make sure they don't spread these hallucinations where they make things up and spread this disinformation and all the terrible things that happen with AI. So absolutely working together with the people who are from the tech industry, who understand how this works, you can put in these guardrails to work on that sort of principle.
Let's bring in James Heale of the Spectator. James, you're watching, you're spectating, which is what you're supposed to do. What do you make of this? It places us, we're told at any rate, at the forefront. I'd rather be there than in the vanguard anytime. Is it a good thing?
Yes, I think so. I think we need to remember, of course, that how little politicians have done on this over the past few years. AI has become a huge industry now, just I think worth about $500 billion in the US alone. And yet the politicians have been really slow to catch up on this, not for the first time in terms of tech. So I think even just getting them all around together, there's a line in Rishi Sunak's speech today when he spoke about how, people said that we couldn't get China and we couldn't get China to sign up. And I think he felt a real sense of victory there. So even them getting them all in the room, this has the real potential here for risks and rewards. And I think, I was talking to someone within government this week who compared it to the really slow progress in terms of nuclear arms over 20, 30 years. No one liked the Russians, but we had to do business with them. So I think jaw is always better than war. And really, in this case, it's about trying to get a sort of basic agreement of principles, getting all the countries together and setting the basis up for future negotiations.
And let's bring Will Guyatt in. Will, is partly this due to Rishi Sunak's personal penchant for AI? He loves it. He's a massive fan. He's a huge techie. He understands it. Various people have said that he is so adept at it and so well schooled in it that he could actually give masterclasses to all of the techies at the convention. So are we fortunate in having a Prime Minister who loves all this stuff?
No, we've got a Prime Minister who's lining himself up for a job in Silicon Valley. I think that's definitely
Hasn't he already had one, though? Hasn't he already had a job in Silicon Valley?
Doesn't matter. He can go back for another one once he's finished ruling the UK, a more higher value job. The situation you face here is, I think there's quite a lot to be proud of from this conference, but there's a lot of things that are frustrating too. Many countries want to position themselves as the leaders in artificial intelligence. The UK was effectively outplayed by the US, who held briefings in the UK yesterday at the US Embassy with the key leading lights that attended the event. You've got France and Germany competing in the EU to be the European lead in the world of artificial intelligence. And the reality is we may have got 20 plus countries to sign up to the proposal that will look at some guidelines, but there's many countries who haven't. And that's also one of the big concerns here. And as for everybody getting really excited about Elon Musk talking to Rishi Sunak tonight, there's far better, more august, better experts that could have been speaking to the Prime Minister tonight about artificial intelligence. When you consider that just yesterday, Elon Musk was suggesting that if you give AI to environmentalists, it could mean the end of the world. That's the type of stuff that people like Mike Graham and Julia Hartley-Brewer love, but it's just irresponsible coverage. It's just not reality. The reality is, Vanessa, right now, artificial intelligence is more likely to make decisions about your insurance policy than do any of the things that we're all scared about.
May I ask you, whom would you have preferred the Prime Minister talk to? You're not keen on Elon Musk as the guest. Who should he be talking to?
You had leaders from companies like OpenAI that are actually developing artificial intelligence. You had some of the founding fathers and the founders of AI companies. So there'll be plenty of other people there who would have been better qualified to have talked about artificial intelligence than Elon Musk.
And Andrew, you are excited about this
I'm a musketeer, I have to say. I think Elon is absolutely brilliant. He's not going to smoke a spliff as he did with Joe Rogan in 2018, I'm sure, with the Prime Minister tonight. But basically what's happening, it's going to draw an audience. And that's the idea. If people can understand the capabilities, we should be rightly proud of what we've achieved in this country. I think having it at the home of the code breakers makes a lot of sense at Bletchley Park. And we should celebrate our brilliance, both in scientific terms and also creativity. It was front and centre of the new Beatles release, which we're talking about now and then.
We will be talking about it on this programme. It'll be our final item this hour. Some people shed tears because they were so moved. Some people shed tears, they were excruciated by it. You just think that this is a shining example, do you, of
fantastic
AI?
example. And what Rishi's done, he says, look, AI knows no borders. So basically, you're right, Joe Biden sort of preempted things. He said, well, America wants to be front and centre, but they wouldn't have had China at the table, for example. And I think it's right that we need to have everybody on a worldwide basis looking at this and helping to find solutions.
James Heale at The Spectator, what are you most worried about when you're thinking of AI? What concerns you most?
Well, I think that Andrew made a good point there, talking about making sure that all countries are involved in this. I think in terms of the different technological imperatives and incentives, and that needs to be worked out. Also, I've been covering in Parliament these past couple of years what's happened with the online safety bill. Clearly tech is evolving at a really rapid pace that even the people most up on it are concerned about it, let alone those legislating. So I think being left behind is something I'm a bit concerned about. But I think it does help having politicians who use the quote unquote bully pulpit to try and raise awareness of this. Obviously, we're still coming to terms with it. And even us in sort of who cover this world are surprised at the advances made in the past sort of year or so. So I think that there's a lot to be concerned about, but I think having this conference over the past few days has been a good place to start.
Well, guys, I had a guest on my show from America a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, I find all items on the show fascinating because it's my show, but I particularly like this guy because he was talking about Chinese spies and he was talking about what it is the Chinese are spying upon. And you would have thought it was, you know, international espionage, industrial secrets, government secrets, but it turned out to be creative secrets. It turned out to be all our R&D, research and development. So people would try and research and develop a really excellent new hamburger, and the Chinese would just sashay in at the last minute and just nick all the research and development that people, I know it's not funny at all, but you know, that people have spent an enormous amount of money formulating. Is AI implicated in this kind of spying that could be spying across the board, not just government secrets, but industrial secrets, creative secrets, fashion secrets, makeup secrets, I don't know, our sexual secrets, all sorts of secrets?
Well, what actually happened with ChatGPT was loads of people were asking questions about their own companies and spreading and spilling secrets, which were then recanted by that particular platform. But you find yourself in an interesting situation when it comes to China in these conversations. I'm quite pleased that they were there and were part of it. And like Andrew said, that was a huge achievement. I definitely agree with that, because at the same time as suggesting that China is, not to be trusted and not to be allowed to these events, most of those ministers still have iPhones. iPhones have more Chinese components than ever before, the latest models of the iPhone. So either we get rid of Chinese technology from the entire existence of the human race in the West, or we work out a way of working with them and having conversations. Because if we don't, we'll be left behind in world like artificial intelligence, where they're already spending billions and billions of dollars and are looking to try and get ahead from other countries.
Andrew, you're fascinated by this, you're a fan of it, you're excited by it. What are the elements of it that you think will bring the biggest benefits to humankind?
I think it will get over all the mundane tasks. I think
For example?
For example, you're talking about anything which is repetitive in terms of that sort of stuff, anything which basically takes up a huge amount of our time. And whilst Goldman Sachs said we're going to lose 300 million jobs, the jobs that we have today, 40 years ago, 60% of those jobs didn't even exist. That's the exciting thing. It's going to free up people to be far more creative. In the creative industries, use it rather as a co-pilot rather than somebody who's going to turn things around. And I think the Beatles is a great example. It tidied up John Lennon's vocals, it made the guitar, you could hear that, so it worked on that sort of basis. You can make that happen. Collaboration is going to be tremendous. The advances in science means that we can discover cures for diseases we never thought possible. We can solve world hunger. We can solve all those sort of things on that sort of basis.
How far away are we from that kind of nirvana?
Well, it's already happening. So, for example, I work very closely with Moorfields. They've discovered that looking at the eye and the bit that artificial intelligence can do, it can basically predict things like Parkinson's 7 years ahead of time.
And are they already using it? And
They're already using it. And that's the great thing about it. And it's just going to get better. So,
and we know, for example, because it's quite hard to imagine this if you're not an expert, so in kind of concrete terms, surgery, for example, surgery on nerves, the kind of thing that human error could end up causing somebody to be paralysed or causing somebody to be incredibly impaired for the rest of their lives. If you have AI doing the operation, they can be precise to the most extraordinary degree.
Absolutely.
Is that kind of thing,
absolutely.
Right?
And they can also look at all the charts and all the test results and predict things in a glorious way. You can make basically people who are paralysed, you can make them speak. You can do, and we saw all sorts of wonderful creations and that sort of thing. It's only going to get better. And I think whilst we should be aware of what the risks are, we should also celebrate the great achievements. And it's British at the heart.
Right.
I think
So
this will be Rishi Sunak's greatest
legacy. If we
legacy.
have listeners and viewers who probably have a smartphone. I mean, they might not. I know I was one of the last. I was touting about my £8 Nokia till the pandemic.
Oh, I miss those.
I know, yeah.
Oh.
But let's say they have a smartphone. They may have a laptop. Pretty much, they may have an Alexa type of device, a Siri, but that's pretty much all they've got.
Yes.
How do ordinary folk who aren't particularly techie get on board with this kind of a thing?
Well, try some of it. So people talk about ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Go and try it. There's lots of free versions for it. Tap it, ask it questions and so on and so forth. And people say, for example, with doctors, they're talking about the massive waiting times that we have. They say chatting to ChatGPT is better than chatting to your GP in terms of more empathy, in terms of more detailed answers and so on and so forth. The best way about it, and I talk around the world on this, is just experiment. Don't be shut up. Don't be scared of trying the new technology. The possibilities are phenomenal and we should embrace them.
Let me ask James the same thing. James, what do you think people who aren't really involved could do to be involved and be infused and be transformed by a bit of AI instead of scared?
Well, I think the most interesting thing from an individual level is looking at how it's going to affect your industry. And I think you've discussed a little bit there. There's some concerns around musicians, around data protection and copyright issues. I think that's going to be a huge, huge one, whereby different bits of industries are complaining, hang on a sec, we've done all this work and AI is just reinventing the wheel and inventing our work. And actually, there are going to be real concerns around that. So I think there's going to be big pressure to intervene in certain different fields of industry, of business, etc. But I think also you need to weigh up those risks and weigh up how we sort of mitigate those, along with potential rewards. And I think the health field, I think, is going to be really, really significant, as you say. And also think the most likely thing which politicians can control is, of course, the public sector. And the real hope here is, of course, we can make efficiency savings in terms of how administrative decisions are made, in terms of, for instance, processing backlogs, looking at how benefit claims are, for instance, signed on, signed off, etc. So that could be the big saving and the most practical we'd like to see, because, as I say, politicians have often been very slow on this, but the one thing they can really control is the public sector. And that's why, for instance, Joe Biden's executive order this week on AI, I think the field in which we're going to see most success for him is in terms of looking at how the federal government operates in terms of its agencies.
All right, let me give Will one-liner, just a one-liner, a way in which you think ordinary members of the public who aren't clued up on this could benefit quite quickly from some kind of form of AI.
Well, ChatGPT, definitely. Stuff like DALL-E, which is like the visual version of that. You can create oil paintings or comic strips or whatever you like. It's easy to experiment with. There's plenty of solutions online to go and play with. And then in the next few years, it will be in more of our lives on a daily basis.
Thank you very much, all of you, really.